Ryen Russillo from the Russillo podcast. Follow him at Ryen Russillo on Ryen A. Russillo on Twitter and get his NBA takes. He's a part of the the Woj podcast, which was released today on NBA free agency. So check that out as well. And he joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Ryen, welcome back, man. What's going on?
Well, yesterday was unlike anything I've ever seen. So it's almost like I don't smoke, but I felt like I needed a cigarette,
Just to calm yourself down a little bit. Of all the weirdness and wildness of yesterday, what was the most eye-opening thing that happened that maybe came out of right field?
Actually, I think it's you guys. It's all the maneuvering. It's all the different things that the Sixers were able to pull off. And, like when it all kind of came down, I was sitting there thinking about it. Like I could talk myself into any of this stuff, and I could maybe argue against it as well. And if you start with Jimmy, it was kind of funny to see Houston just try to force this leaked story out there that didn't make any sense for Philadelphia whatsoever to get Butler the extra year. And then once the Miami thing started picking up, I go, okay, if you're Philadelphia, like what stood out about last year? And clearly Butler was upset. He's difficult. I don't think he necessarily loved the Brett Brown situation a ton. I don't know if he got along with everybody, but again, his track record is that he doesn't get along with a lot of guys anyway. But we do know that, when it came down to some real crunch time buckets, like he was the guy that was like, all right, everybody, I got this. Like he was the least afraid. And I'm not saying necessarily like Embiid was afraid or anything. It's just, it's harder for Embiid to maybe get it going and post touches as much as I love him, which I say all the time. And, Simmons is kind of hit or miss depending on the game. So Butler, I thought, really stood out. And you go, maybe you don't want to give him that money. He had in his age, the Tibbs years, which feel like it's almost like buying a used rental car instead of just a used car. And I would have been okay with Philadelphia trying to figure it out, but Jimmy wanted out and he wanted the extra money, so he got it. And then to be able to turn that into a guy like Josh Richardson, which I know there were some late delays on it and all, that's a really nice piece for somebody that's not going to be asked to do a lot because you guys definitely need scoring. So then to add Horford to it, and yeah, it's a lot of money, and it's under the $100 million. The bonuses seem impossible for him to get unless they win a title. But I love Horford. I love that Horford fits into any system. I've talked to Horford about this. I said, watching you come out of school, it's funny to think that you basically played out of position your entire career because as good as he is as a center, he's still a better and more natural power forward. But the way the league has gone is he's always had to play center. So he can play center when Embiid's out. He can play power forward along him. He can space the floor. He's an amazing passer. You guys know how good he is defensively. So it's a huge team. And I'm not worried about the bench because GMs just don't seem worried about the bench anymore. I like it. I mean, I don't know how it's all going to work out. It's so big. I love the Horford part of it. Tobias is a lot of money. It scares me a little bit. Teams all love him and then end up trading him. But it's an asset at least, and that's kind of what this game is about. So I think Philadelphia did a lot of things that, the Harris thing and the Butler thing ended up not being too surprising, but getting Horford away from Boston was a huge get. So I'm excited. I'm probably as excited to watch them as anybody.
Yeah, I mean, this is like the 8th different roster Brett Brown will have here, but, this is an opportunity for him with Horford to really, I wonder if Brett will use him in a similar way that Brad Stevens used Horford against the Sixers. And, it's kind of like an upgraded version of what they wanted for Dario, right? I mean, Dario was, when he was good, but when he wasn't, he was kind of clunky and out of place. Horford seems like he would be a much better fit for what Dario was doing here.
I actually just, he's not going to handle the ball as much as, Dario, one of his pluses, and one thing I always liked, the parts of him that you really liked was that he was a guy, especially when he was coming into the draft, could really initiate an offense with a little ball handling, a little playmaking, and Horford can handle, and Horford's passing is great, but it's more of him kind of waiting and dissecting a little bit more. Boston, it's just funny because, Boston signed him to that contract a couple years ago. And I felt like I was arguing with people all the time. And they're like, this guy's really not that good. He's not worth this money. And you go, well, first of all, you got to go by the rules of this. Like when you can get a free agent, it's almost always more than you want it to be unless it's a tier 1 guy because that's just the way it works. And he's not going to have nights where, let's talk about a playoff game. Like you're not going to be dumping it into Horford. Horford's not going to be sitting there killing you from 3-point line. He's going to have games where he scores 8 points. And I think the casual fan's going to be thinking, this guy's not worth all this money. You're going to be kidding me. But every team that's ever had him is like, no, there's so many little things whether it's the way he's setting screens, the way he's help defending, the way he's rebounding, the way he's spacing the floor for other guys, especially drivers, because you have to have, if he's not in there with Embiid, I mean, it's going to be really brutal if they keep Embiid and Horford out, and then other bigs have to space out and stay with them, and how it opens up the passing lanes. There's just a lot of very special little things that Horford does. And, yeah, at the end of the contract, like we can talk about year 3 because that's a lot of money for him at that age, especially at the end of this whole thing. But it's about probably these next 2 years and trying to figure this thing out instead of waiting for 3. So I get why they did it. And like I said, I can't wait to see how it all comes together because, there's some things I'm a little worried about, but I'm still, like I said, excited.
Ryan, I want to go back to something you said a few minutes ago, and that was the Sixers had their guy in crunch time, which was Jimmy Butler. He was the guy that was never afraid to take the shot. He facilitated the offense in the half-court sets for almost every fourth quarter in almost every playoff game this past postseason. Now it's pretty clear that Elton Brand invested in Tobias Harris. He's going with the younger guy, and the question is, can Tobias Harris live up to this pressure now? Because he has to figure out a way to be that constant scorer and hopefully a guy that the Sixers can rely on in the fourth quarter.
I don't know if he's going to be that guy because no one else has really thought he is, and I already can hear the Sixers argument, fans going, "Oh, you'd be kidding me!" Look at the numbers. Like 20 points are not equal across the league. Like everyone's 20 points aren't the same, and there are times where you forgot about him, but that's because the ball is in the other 3 guys' hands. So it's not even a knock on Tobias Harris. But if you think in big playoff moments that like Tobias Harris is just going to create a ton of different shot opportunities for you and carry you, then that's a pretty lofty. Like I don't look at it as like he has to live up to that. I just assume he's not really that guy, and I like him. But what do we have to go on that tells us like he's that kind of dude? I mean, why is Orlando, Milwaukee, the Clippers? You know what I mean? Like he's been on a bunch of teams, and so I understand what they gave up. They felt like they gave up more for Harris than they did Butler, so they wanted to make sure that they kept Harris. And I know this sounds like I'm knocking it. I'm not. Like one of the beauties of him is that he's kind of a high efficiency, low usage rate guy. But if you're going to try to turn him into some high usage, ball handling, create all sorts of shots, hit really tough shots, like those guys are hard to find. Or you could have a Westbrook who makes some of those shots, but he also takes like 40 of them. So this is where Brett Brown's going to have to get real creative, man. Like he's really going to have to figure this out and tinker and do some stuff. And that's the part where Simmons scares me a little. Is that if it's Horford, Simmons, and Embiid, like what's Simmons going to be doing? Because he's not spacing the floor. It's tough to run some pick and roll stuff with him unless he keeps the ball, and it's kind of that fake handoff where he killed everybody on that last year. But he's got to show some marginal improvement, or at least a threat to be guarded out there. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. And that's the difficulty that we all know. I mean, it's not being a hater by pointing out the reality that there are some obvious limitations with what you get from Simmons, especially once things get a little tougher to score. So Brett's going to have to get really creative. And I imagine there's probably going to be some stretches offensively where it doesn't look great. I imagine there's other times where it's going to look great, but they're probably going to try a bunch of different things because they have so many different looks they can throw you, which I think is a huge advantage.
Absolutely. They're definitely reloaded, defensively focused. But I want to go back to Jimmy Butler with you, Rye, because that whole dynamic is interesting. And a lot of Sixers fans, even today, is kind of questioning and playing the blame game. Like, well, did Jimmy not want to be here, or did Elton Brand go a different direction? Did they try and lowball him, or was Philly never in Jimmy's plans? And when you look at it, I mean, I think it's a little bit of both, but ultimately, if you had to say this is why, I know that's hard to do. I'm putting you on the spot there, and that's ridiculous. But in your opinion, why did Jimmy end up parting ways with Philly, and now he's in a Miami Heat uniform?
I actually think Elton and the ownership did something really smart throughout the year when they had all these guys. They just, we're paying everybody. And everybody's like, what? And we're like, hey, what are you going to do? Hey, shut up. Like, we're just going to pay everybody. Don't worry about it. And it actually calmed down the conversation, and it was less of a distraction. And I kind of made a joke yesterday that it was almost like the front office ownership Kyrie version of it, where Kyrie just goes, hey, if you'll have me back, I'd love to re-sign, and everybody gets up and cheers. The only difference is that Kyrie just decided to blow it up on himself and have everybody hate him in Boston, where the Sixers were smart enough to not say anything until it was actually decision-making time. So just because they said, hey, we're paying everybody, doesn't mean that they always thought they were going to pay everybody. So the Butler thing is is, I hate to kind of do like, this is exactly what it is. I mean, I'm not covering the team, man. The beat reporters are in those locker rooms. They understand it better than I do. I can share with you kind of the rumblings and also the resume. And the resume for Butler is, he went nuclear on the Bulls, and I kind of sided with Jimmy Butler at that time. And then he goes nuclear even more so on Minnesota, rips and destroys everybody in practice, times it out perfectly to also have an interview on the jump later that day. The whole thing was completely orchestrated. And then the Sixers end up with him without not necessarily, they didn't have to give up a ton for him. And I think Jimmy also hurt his own market because some teams around the league were like, look, man, like he's a good player and all, but he's not like that guy. He's not a top 10. He's not a perennial top 15 player. So he also hinted at the Brett Brown stuff that, he wasn't feeling it. And, I don't know, when you're a guy like Butler, like he's just abrasive, and to hear like, hey, I want a team built around me. Well, what does that mean? You want to lose and be a 7th or 8th seed and have the rest of the Heat roster around you? So, if I'm a Sixers fan, yes, there's some late game concerns that I've already brought up, but another part would just be like, hey, thanks, man, but enjoy the Heat. Good luck down there. And the 5th year for Tobias is a bummer, but that's the market, and that's what you're going to have to do. And if you're going to let Jimmy go, you had to go that far with Harris. But if the Sixers didn't want to do the 5th year with him when they already thought he was a difficult guy who has that reputation and they'd seen it a little bit firsthand, he might have gotten real comfortable with Philly halfway through the year. And if things weren't working out the way he wanted them to work out for him, specifically as an offensive player, then the Sixers may have said, this might not be even worth it. And, to get an asset back for it for a guy that you don't want to give the 4 years to or the 5th year to, that's probably the thing too, is like once he found out there wasn't a 5th year, I don't think that Houston thing was random. I think that was him going, all right, let's see if the Rockets are in this enough. But again, the Sixers should have laughed at any of those proposals, and then at least the Heat had a piece that Philadelphia would want back.
Ryen Russillo is with us here, Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. We got plenty of things to fire off about him. I want to go to Boston then, because they basically swapped out Kyrie with Kemba, and then today Cantor is in and Horford is out. Now, I know a lot of people would look at this and think that Boston kind of lost 2 better players with Kyrie and Horford. And I'm not debating that. I love Kemba, and I think he's going to be a great fit there. I think they got a downgrade with Cantor. But is there a part of you that thinks that yes,
slightly.
But is there a part of you that thinks that getting Kemba and letting Tatum kind of become more of a part of their offense, that might actually work out better for them, and that they still have a guy in Kemba that's there late in game? Because when Kyrie was out, they were pretty good. Their problem was they didn't have that finisher guy. But could they be pretty good and now have Kemba be their finisher?
I expect Tatum and Brown both to be better just because Kyrie's gone. I really do. And, the Celtics are this really weird team where, this is where some of the analytics stuff drives me nuts, that if you don't watch him, you go, oh, wait a minute, what are you talking about? Kyrie had his best year ever, and look at where they rank and all these different things. And when you watched it, you just saw that it didn't really click. So there's all sorts of different numbers you could argue whatever you want with that team. But I just know that there was a disconnect between Kyrie not feeling like he was respected enough by the younger guys, and the younger guys being like, why are we supposed to bow to you? You're only a few years older. So that was a major part of the problem, and you could see it play out at times. And Jalen was a mess the first half of the season, and then I thought he was really their most aggressive and kind of the guy that just said, screw this, like I'm just going to do my thing, but in a good way. And Tatum regressed, which is a little scary. And there's some numbers that tell you it's the same season statistically, but I just thought he regressed. I watched some of the games. So I'm with you there. Let's just remove from Kyrie. It should make it better. Kemba's a really nice fit, and they also had to use that money while they could once Horford and Kyrie left, and make sure they used it on somebody before the extensions kicked in for the other young players. And even though the Kemba contract may again feel like a lot, and I wouldn't say he's necessarily a top 15 guy, even though he made third team this year, he can bring the ball up, he can initiate your offense, he can run pick and roll, but he can also play off a little bit. So I think that's really cool that Brad Stevens could find some things here. And if Hayward even comes close to getting back to what he was, where he was really good at initiating the Jazz offense, then they may have something here. But the Cantor thing, I'm all set with Cantor. I know that people saw these glimpses. I think he gets destroyed against good teams defensively, and there are times you can't keep him on the floor. The Knicks were all set with him. I think he had some kind of renaissance there with Portland, with the media, where everybody was doing a million interviews with him, and everybody started liking him again. so maybe the Knicks are wrong and never give him any minutes. But Horford was somebody you could always keep on the floor in everything, and Kanter is somebody that you have to pay attention to how he's getting used, and smaller players just attack the hell out of him. And he's a really good offensive player. He's very polished. He's been that way since we thought he was going to play at Kentucky, like really advanced stuff for a young guy around the hoop. But I don't know, man. The drop-off defensively from him to Horford. So, like, even though I get the Celtics moves and the Kemba thing makes all the sense, it's about getting some sort of asset when assets are leaving. But on paper, depending on what happens here with Toronto, it's still probably them fourth or fifth, because let's see what happens with Brooklyn. And, I think the Pacers actually did a decent job of turning some things over and probably remaining competitive once Oladipo comes back. So Boston's still got some work to do. And when half the league has a lot of cap space and Kanter goes for 2 years and $10 million, that tells you that a lot of teams already know the deal with him.
So you bring up and KD and Kyrie, they're teaming up there, and I'd like to be a fly on the wall with those conversations in the locker room between Kyrie and his Instagram posts and everything else that's going on with him. But they two, those two team up in New York. If you're a New York Knicks fan, I mean, what the heck? Like, I've been hearing this for years, Ryan. Like, 2019, the summer of 2019,
yeah.
KD's coming, Zion's coming, and their palms are just in the air right now. Like, now what?
I don't know how it ended up like this. I mean, the Knicks thing collectively, all of the New York City basketball stuff is incredibly overrated. So let's start there. I mean, it's been 40 years since the title, basically. You talk about all these New York City legends and all these guys, and I mean, it really, I mean, we go back to like Kenny Anderson and Stephon Marbury, okay? So it's been a little too long, unless you want to count Lenny Cook. So the New York thing, as a whole, and whenever, like I made this analogy the other day, whenever somebody starts arguing about a player, whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame, the sooner you have to bring up his gold medal, the less likely that guy is to be a Hall of Famer, because everybody gets a freaking gold medal, okay? Everybody. So, as soon as somebody's like, 4 All-Stars and an Olympic gold medal, when you have to talk about the Knicks and the first thing you say is MSG, then what are we really talking about? It's bad ownership. I actually think this front office has it far more figured out than previous versions of it. Dolan, and I don't know I want to give him a pass on anything, but after being a guy that meddled, decided to hand it all to Phil. Unfortunately, he was hiring a guy with a resume that didn't want to work anymore, and he had to keep paying him more and more to convince him to take a job that he didn't want. So then eventually it's like, all right, fine, if you're going to give me $12 million a year, like I guess I'll run the Knicks. But I'm not going to be that into it. And so that backfires, and then he kind of resets it. And I like some of the guys in their front office. And, if you have no one to build around, and for whatever reason, like Kyrie wanted to go to Brooklyn more than he wanted to go to the Knicks, and Durant and Kyrie, despite never being teammates, apparently decided to be best friends at some point. I know that sounds like I'm just not. But I've always felt like you think you can know somebody and be friends, and then you can be roommates, and it can change, and maybe it gets better. But a lot of times you're like, oh man, I thought I knew this guy. Now they're teammates, okay, and now it's real. And I guess really they'll be teammates next year. But it's such a slap, even in an overrated franchise, as far as being considered iconic in the Knicks. It's such a slap in the face to think like, you know what, we're going to actually go to Brooklyn because we feel like this franchise is more stable and an owner that nobody knows anything about. And Sean Marks, who has done a really good job with this franchise, it looks like it was a death sentence. But I just don't know. Like the Knicks, and, here's the thing: like some of the guys they signed are kind of nice. Like RJ Barrett may be nice. Julius Randle's a really nice signing. I'm not sure about Kevin Knox, but there may be some things there. But you can't spend all year expecting Kyrie and Durant to go, hey, cool, Julius Randle's been pretty efficient, and expect the fan base to be excited. So I feel bad for that fan base, but other than an arena, I don't know what the selling point was.
By the way, Lenny Cook lives in our area. He's a listener of the show, so we just gave Lenny a little shout out.
I'm a huge Lenny Cook
free
fan,
plug for Lenny there.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, he listens. So what's up, Lenny? Now, real quick on
guy, so,
what?
Anyway, that's why. Yeah.
There we go. Willie Glass is in our listening audience today. By the way, he lives down here.
Name drops.
Yeah, Willie gave me a St. John shirt one time. It's sweet. It's really cool. So you got this situation with Kawhi sitting here. He's the last guy, right? Now, if you're Kawhi, are you like stringing one of these teams along? Like I tweeted out earlier, like I would love for him to string the Lakers along and just give the Kawhi laugh at them, just like ha ha ha, and then just go, "I'm going to the Clippers, man." So, do you anticipate Kawhi doing something crazy, or like just status quo, staying in Toronto, or is Kawhi going to just do something like he's a fun guy all of a sudden?
I've always said this since really going back to last week when we started talking to more and more teams about the plan here with Kawhi was that I've never had a player, and I'm talking about teams. I mean, forget me because I'm not like some reporter who's been doing this for decades. But there's never been a player of this magnitude that teams have known less about. There are no leaks. There's no inner circle. There's no rumblings like we've had with other guys. I mean, the Nets thing with Kyrie and KD wasn't a total shock. Like we had been hearing versions of this for months, right? And even KD going to Golden State. Like I remember the first time I'd heard about it was January of that year. With Kawhi, it's completely different. I mean, there's rarely bad information. So the thing I don't understand about Kawhi through all this, and this is probably the Kawhi lesson in general, because we used to think, hey, he's the superstar who gets it, right? He's the guy that he's happy. He doesn't care about branding, doesn't care about any of that stuff. He's team first, perfect Spur, perfect Popovich guy. And in fact, he was more miserable than maybe any of these other guys ever have been, which was just, we're like, whoa, Kawhi's upset. So always be ready to be surprised by this guy. So, Toronto didn't really get screwed over in the last 24 hours because they kind of knew what their team was going to be with or without him. But if you're the Clippers and Lakers and miss out on this guy, and honestly, I think you kind of, if you're Kawhi, have done, if it's one of the Lakers teams, your own future roster a disservice by waiting this long, because the Clippers had to stay in a holding pattern all day. And granted, yes, if the Lakers added Kawhi, it's going to be real slim pickings for the rest of the roster, but at least the team knows what you're doing. So, everybody's in a Kawhi love fest right now because of how awesome he is and what he just pulled off. But the reality is, he's not only hurting his team, but he's hurting himself if it ends up being one of the two LA teams. The pitch, again, living out here, and, Lakers fans are totally out of control. They make Sixers fans seem like from the nicest parts of Canada, okay? Lakers fans are just like this Kobe militia out here that's just nasty. But the selling point is pretty simple. It's just, if you're going to come to LA and play basketball, if you're Kawhi, maybe the best player in the world, why would you go to the Clippers and not the Lakers? And part of that pitch is going to be, don't kid yourself here. And I think another part of it is, from a basketball standpoint, Kawhi wanting to make sure that he and LeBron are on the same page in the style that they want to play. Here's the thing. LeBron's going to tell him whatever he wants to hear because LeBron needs him. LeBron wants him. And then you put those three guys together and we'll see how the rest of it plays out. Like, that's still a ridiculous top three, maybe the best top three. I think it actually would be the best top three it is that LeBron's ever had. But I don't know. Like, can Kawhi, if he's on the fence and still worried about it, is he just going to hear an answer that he wants to hear that's going to make him feel better about this offense? Like, and none of this could have been worked out in the last week. So that part of it I don't really get. But like I've said, throughout this entire Kawhi storyline for over a year now, there's been a lot of stuff that surprised all of us.
Well, that one will be interesting. We'll all be waiting to see what he ends up doing. Ryen Russillo, the Russillo podcast. He was just a part of the Woj podcast, and you can check him out on Twitter, Ryen A. Russillo. He joined us here on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Ryan, appreciate it, pal. Good stuff.
All right, thanks, guys.